welcome to season 3 of the Culture Stew podcast.
So in the end, I'm grateful for how those experiences shaped me and my career.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I love how you describe Staten Island. It's something that I know that we'll be kind of pulling out as we have this conversation. I've been sort of noticing this in a lot of the discussions around equity. And I think just in terms of so many of us who are drawn to this work, to doing DEI work, to focusing on issues of social justice and sort of equalizing the playing field, is that many of us do have these stories of being othered that immediately give us this sense of when we do have power, we want to stand up for others. And I'll be curious, kind of as we go into this, and maybe just if you can, maybe we can start by defining what equity is and how it's different from equality. But, how for those individuals who have been just steeped in privilege and unaware of it, right? And it's not an attack on those individuals, but just recognizing that the more privilege that I have, or in any way, shape, or form where I have privilege, that just automatically creates some blind spots for me, right? These are things I don't have to think about every day. And so I think it's really hard sometimes for folks to develop that connection and that sense of empathy at its deepest level when they don't have the experience of being othered. So just a topic or an issue that I would love to sort of hear a little bit more about. But yeah, let's start with the basic definition. So how do you define equity, Minal, and how is it different from equality?
Yeah, so equality is where everybody gets the same thing. Equity is when people get what they need to participate fully. Equity is not afraid of difference. It actually leverages difference for innovation, for creativity, and so that people can participate fully in an organization or a society and really thrive. And so equity actually then guarantees us equal access to opportunity. That's really the role of equity in its relationship to equality, because equality is not always wrong, right? Like the LGBT movement, at one point, there was a push for civil unions, and then they strategically made a decision to push for marriage equality because the institution of marriage had to be an equal right, even though families are different. But then there are some instances where the same thing doesn't work. So if your kid has a learning disorder, then getting extra time with a teacher or a tutor in order to read at the level of your peers is a difference that allows you equal access to opportunity.
One of the things that I've experienced in having dialogues with people around equity is that there does seem to be this perspective of it potentially being a zero-sum game, right? That people feel as though, well, if we're focusing on equity and trying to level the playing field, that has a negative impact on me, which is not fair, right? And so I'm just curious to know, how do you respond to that? This issue of the potential for this to be a zero-sum game or an either-or situation.
Yeah, so I actually think we need to trace it back to your earlier comments about privilege and marginalization. So I really believe that almost everyone has both experiences of marginalization and privilege. How it's distributed might vary, but everybody has it. And more importantly, I don't think you can be a good DEI practitioner until you can talk about both in the same breath, right? That, we use a tool called the Group Identity Wheel that was created by Sukari Pinnock-Fitz and Amber Mays of Fifth Domain Coaching. And it's extraordinary in helping people understand the complexity of their identity. So while you may have privilege according to race, you may not have it according to gender. You may not have it according to socioeconomic status. You may not have it according to ethnicity or culture, right? Or even if you do have, and while you may have marginalization on a lot of those, you may have privilege when it comes to ability or religion particularly. right? And this is what's missing, I think, when we talk about these things and we like to generalize like, oh, well, this is a person who's steeped in privilege, or this is a person who's only had experiences of marginalization. I don't think that's rarely ever true, right? And one of the things I often talk about is that as an Indian American woman, like I have definitely experienced being marginalized because of white supremacy and colonialism, but also there is a lot of anti-Blackness in the Indian community. And so we get a privilege when we walk in the room that Black women may not. And there's also a caste system that we invented 5,000 years ago that is leading to a lot of oppression and exclusion. And so when you begin to understand your whole identity in its complexity, you understand that you're on both sides of the equation. And then the application of equity becomes a lot less threatening because you understand that everybody is gaining and losing in order to create a more equitable world. But we gain together as humanity. Is like the sum of it is, it's greater than the sum of its parts, right? Like the small losses add up to a monumental gain for all of us as humanity. And so we need to widen our lens then and see that in order to be able to be really committed to equity.
The Culture Stew podcast is a product of MSM Global Consulting and produced by Shelby Rowe Productions. Please give us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform so other people can find us. There are many ways to connect and keep the conversation going with us. Check out our website at www.msmglobalconsulting.com. You can also share your thoughts with us directly by emailing info@msmglobalconsulting.com and putting Culture Stew in the headline. Follow us on Instagram at MSM_global, Facebook at MSM Global Consulting, Twitter at Global MSM, and LinkedIn at MSM Global Consulting. Let's keep the conversation going.